A question I've been getting asked a lot is whether there's any risk in filing an I-90 to renew your green card. And historically, my answer would be something like this. Like, no, there's no risk. I've even seen people with like deportable crimes renew their green cards, or people who let their green card lapse for like 10 years, file an I-90 and just pretty quickly get a new green card. So there's no risk. But that all seems to be changing right now. For the first time in my career, I'm seeing a lot of requests for evidence being issued when people file the I-90 to renew their green cards. So I want to talk to you quickly about two reasons or two things that have caused these requests for evidence to be issued and what the worst case scenario might look like for people who are wondering. So I've seen two different types of requests for evidence issued when people have filed I-90s recently. The first one is for people who've spent too much time outside of the US. USCIS will issue a request for evidence asking for explanations and exact dates of entry, departure, why you spent so much time outside of the US, what you were doing, and what ties you maintained to the US during that time. And the few times I've seen this in the last 2 months, we've prepared detailed responses and we're waiting for the next steps. But basically what I've heard from other attorneys who are also dealing with these issues is that USCIS will then use that information to determine whether they're going to issue a notice to appear in immigration court to begin formally removing your permanent residence from you. The second scenario I've seen is where people file an I-90 and then USCIS issues a request for evidence asking for criminal records for a crime that was committed while the person was a permanent resident. And the idea behind this is going to be they're going to take those records that you submit and determine whether they're going to issue a notice to appear in immigration court. So all of these requests for evidence are geared towards stripping people of their permanent residence, of their green cards. So let's talk about what would happen if you actually got a notice to appear in immigration court. So instead of getting a new green card, you would get a notice to appear. And this would have some major implications. First of all, after a notice to appear has been filed with the court and it's mailed to you generally and you have a court date or a case pending in the immigration court system, you can't easily travel in and out of the US. In fact, if you do leave, you might not be able to come back. That might be viewed as self-deporting and just abandoning the immigration court process entirely. So once a notice to appear is generated, you have to remain continuously in the US. And this process is not a quick process. I mean, you might not have your first court date for 6 to 12 months after the process begins. The process might not even begin for a year after you filed the I-90 renewal. So you'll have to stay in the US pretty continuously and with a lot of anxiety during this time. And by the way, after your first court date, your second court date where they usually make a decision on your case might also be like a year or even more out, depending on where your immigration court proceedings are pending. Now, generally speaking, you're not going to be detained during this time unless your crime was really serious and ICE, in their discretion, determines that you're like a risk to the community or a flight risk or something extenuating. But the vast majority of permanent residents who are placed into removal proceedings are not detained. There are exceptions. It depends on the criminal issue and the ICE officer who receives your case. The other thing that's important to understand is while your case is pending, even though you don't have a green card in your hand because you tried to renew one, or maybe you have one that's about to expire or which already expired, you are still a permanent resident during this entire time. And you have all the rights and privileges of a permanent resident. The only exception I would make is don't travel internationally because it could really mess your case up. You might not have any options available if you depart the US while you're in removal proceedings. You might be viewed as self-deporting and get an automatic deportation order if you fail to come back to the immigration court. And they might not let you back in, so it would eventually likely result in a removal order. Now, with that said, I think the vast majority of permanent residents have nothing to worry about. If you have no criminal history beyond like traffic violations and you've never departed the US for a really long period of time, let's say exceeding 1 year, which would create a presumption that you've abandoned your residency, you should probably have no issues renewing your I-90. I mean, I say probably because USCIS is doing some crazy stuff right now, going through people's social media and stuff. We don't know exactly how that's gonna play out, but the two examples I know for sure that could result in problems when you file your I-90 are criminal issues and long departures from the US. And I would tell everyone, based on all the information I have available right now, that if you don't have those two issues, you should be safe to file your I-90. Now, if something happens and there's more information available in the future and I change that advice, I'll be sure to make a video. So be sure to subscribe if you want to stay up to date with all the latest information. If you personally have an immigration issue and you want to talk to a lawyer about it, you can find my information in the video description below, schedule a consultation, and I would love to speak to you. See you guys next time for another video.